Hello, this is Dane Tolart, and welcome to Cooking in the Great Outdoors. I explore the crossroads for outdoor recreation and food. Right now it's late February here in New England. As you can see, there's still snow in the background, and this is the high time for people to get out and do things like snowboarding, snowshoeing, some winter climbing and whatnot. So that's what we're going to explore today. So what we're going to do is we're going to give you the right fuel to get out there and get active in the middle of the winter. Something that'll stick to your ribs and really give you a lot of energy. And that's going to be Campfire Risotto. First thing we got to do is I have some chicken stock and some vegetable stock that I made up. Now this stuff is great for any kind of camp cooking. And so what I do is I just boil some vegetables and simmer some chicken bones and chicken in a little bit of water and let that sit overnight, and it makes a great stock. And the key to a good risotto is great stock. So this is the first thing we're gonna do, is warm up the stock. So I have all my ingredients right here for the risotto. The stock is starting to warm up, and you can see via the power of my GoPro camera here top down that I have some bacon to provide some fat. I have the actual risotto, which is arboreal rice. It's rice that hasn't been milled, so it still has the kernel, the coating on it. And then I also have some garlic, some pecorino romano cheese, and 2 small onions that I've chopped up. So the key to a real good risotto is to have a fat source to toast your rice in before you add the liquid, and then to slowly ladle that liquid in. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to start with the bacon and some butter and onions and garlic, and then we're going to get that rice all toasted up. We got the heat on, we add our bacon, you can hear that sizzle. And this is about 1/3 of a pound of bacon that I've chopped up into small pieces. And then we also have our butter. It's 1/2 stick of butter. Put that in there, get that all round up. And you can see that I'm using my Coleman 2-burner stove to cook this. I love this stove. It's great for car camping, or if you have a base camp to work out of. It's not exactly an ultralight, so if you're backpacking, this isn't going to be the solution for you. But if you've got a base camp or a car to camp out of, Coleman 2-burner is awesome. Alright, so when we're toasting the risotto, we start with the fire on high. We're melting our butter, we got our bacon in there. Now I'm going to add my garlic, because I love garlic. And it's good for you too, great antioxidant, good for you. I'm going to add my onions. We're going to get that butter all browned up. Now if you want to watch your calories instead of using butter, you can also use olive oil to cut down the fat, but the butter in this case gives a nice brown coating, a brown color to the risotto. It's just going to make it wonderfully toasted before we start adding our stock, so I'm going to go with butter today. Plus then, if you're out there in the winter and you're hiking, you're snowboarding, you're snowshoeing, you're going to the top of Tuckerman's Ravine, you're going to need all that nice extra energy from fat to get you through your adventures. So we're cooking down the bacon and the butter, mixing that with the onions and the garlic, and we're going to keep that going on high until all the butter is melted, the bacon fat is reduced into the onions and the garlic, and then we're going to add our risotto and toast that till it's nice and brown. Now as that bacon is reducing down and mixing with the butter, onions, and garlic, we're going to add a little bit of spice to the base, and then we can add more later once we get the risotto finished. So we have a little bit of oregano we're going to put in. Sage works really good as well if you prefer sage. We got a little bit of salt. Don't overdo the salt. You can always add more later. And then we also have some coarse ground black pepper that we're going to add in there that I ground up in the spice mill. And finally, I like mine with a little extra kick, so we have some dry roasted chili pepper flakes that I made here at home. And we're just going to add a little bit, not too much, so that we don't overdo it. We're going to mix all that up, and while our bacon and our butter and our onions and our garlic are all getting brown, we got to make sure that our stock is warming up, because we want the stock to be nice and warm when we start ladling it into the risotto. And you can already smell the wonderful flavors. I prepared this dish at a couple of events for REI as the outreach specialist, and we were drawing people from all over. They were coming up to the REI tent because of the wonderful smells. was definitely a hit. Okay, our bacon is nice and reduced. All that fat is moving into the onions and the garlic. So now we're going to add our risotto. Once again, our risotto is arboreal rice. Basically what that means is the rice hasn't been milled, so it still has that coating on it. And that outer coating has a lot of pectins. And what's important about the pectins is as you cook them and slowly add water, they release starch and make risotto nice and thick. And that's what really makes it stick to your ribs and makes it a wonderful wintertime fuel source. So we're going to brown up this rice until it's nice and brown, and then we're going to start adding our stock ladle by ladle into the risotto with the bacon and the onions and the garlic. So now you can see the rice is starting to brown nicely. Now we want to get a little bit browner so that the outside husk of that unmilled rice releases all those wonderful starches to make a nice thick creamy risotto. Now we're using bacon for today's recipe, but you can also use various cured dried meats. If weight is an issue where you're going to your base camp, like if you're hiking in or whatnot, you can use things like prosciutto and ham, speck. All those wonderful cured meats will work as a base for this risotto as well to provide that nice, delicious fat source. Okay, now the risotto is starting to get this nice, wonderful brown color from the butter and the bacon fat, so we're going to start adding our stock. Once again, this is a mixture of chicken and vegetable stock, and we're going to just add a few ladles at a time here. And what we're doing is we're allowing the risotto, now that the husk has been broken down, to release all that wonderful starch and slowly absorb the stock. So we don't want to overdo it and just take our time. Now that's the one thing with risotto, you have to be patient. It does take a little time, but it's well worth the wait. And you'll notice that the risotto right now has a little bit of liquid to it. You know you're ready to add the next ladle of stock when you can separate the risotto. We call it parting the sea, if you will. And you can see clear through the bottom of the pan, and it looks like there's not a lot of really loose liquid. So we're going to give this a few more moments and then add a little more stock, and we'll keep that going back and forth. Add a couple of ladles of stock, let the risotto soak it up. Add a few more ladles of stock, let the risotto soak it up. And then once we get all the stock in the risotto, we're going to add our mushrooms. And today I've decided to use, put them right under there under the GoPro camera, dried woodier mushrooms that I rehydrated just by soaking in a little bit of fresh water. I love these mushrooms because when they're dry, they're nice and light, so you can put them in your backpack. Doesn't add a lot of weight. They have a nice texture, they rehydrate real easily, and they cut real easily, but they also add a nice flavor, a nice woody, earthy flavor to whatever you're making, and they're just a wonderful addition not only to risotto, but any campfire dish that you might think of making. Okay, so now you can see from the GoPro camera that the starch is starting to really release from that risotto, from that rice. You can see it's starting to get thicker and thicker the more stock we add, and that's the whole point of risotto. Add a little more stock, release a few more starches, it gets thicker. Add a little more stock, release more starches, it gets even thicker. And once again, that's why risotto is such a wonderful wintertime fuel source, because it has all that nice starch, all that energy to just fuel whatever you're doing. And we're almost to the point now where we can add a little bit more stock. Almost. You see how once the risotto starts to hold up and apart a little bit when you put your spoon through it, it's time to add a little more stock. Not quite there yet. Okay, so now I've gone ahead and switched our pots around so you can get a real good look at the finishing risotto through the GoPro camera on the overhead shot. And you can see how thick and luscious the risotto is starting to get. That's because of all those starches being released from the husk of the risotto there. Now risotto is a bit of a labor of love because you do have to sit on top of it and keep an eye on it. But I tell you what, when you're cooking risotto and all those wonderful smells come up, everybody who's coming back to the campsite or to the base lodge or whatever, they're all gonna be like, dude, give me some of that. And that's exactly what we experienced during one of our events where we were cooking this same dish for REI members and customers, and it was amazing how they just flocked to our tent and wanted to try some of the risotto. Okay, so the risotto's almost ready. It's still a little bit too firm, but now's the time to add these wonderful rehydrated woodier mushrooms. You want to give them a little time to cook into the risotto, soak up some of that wonderful taste of the garlic and the onions, and soften up just a little bit. You want the mushrooms to be slightly firm, not over soft, but you don't want them to be completely raw either. Alright, so our risotto is almost to the perfect point of consistency. So what we're going to do now is I have a little bit of buttermilk in my Life is Good Nalgene here. And the buttermilk is going to give it a nice extra creaminess. So we're just going to add a little bit of the milk. And the good thing about buttermilk is because it's already basically curdled, it'll hold up a little better when you go out camping. So I love to use buttermilk to add to a bunch of my recipes whenever there's a call for a little bit of extra creaminess in that recipe. So we're going to treat the buttermilk as the last couple ladles of stock and let this cook down just a little bit more. And then we're going to add a little bit of pecorino romano cheese to give it a little salty bite. And we're going to save some of the romano cheese to the very end so that we can serve it on top in the bowl. Alright, so the risotto's almost ready. We're just going to add a little bit more pepper to taste, because I like a lot of fresh pepper. A little bit more oregano. Stir that in. And you can see it's bubbling. If you're looking at the GoPro camera, you can see it's bubbling. So I want to make sure I keep stirring it. Stir in all those extra good spices. And I think we're good to go to taste. And just smell those aromas. I wish you could smell how wonderful this... I wish you could smell the wonderful aroma coming off of this. I tell you what, I can't tell you how many times that smell has attracted people to my tent, to my campsite, to our REI booth. That just, oh, it's just amazing. So we're going to turn off our fire so we don't burn it. Get ourselves a plate. Get our ladle. We're just going to ladle up some into the plate here. Got those mushrooms, we have the bacon, the onions, and the garlic. Add a little more of the pecorino romano cheese on top. Let's try it out. Oh, almost took it right out of the bowl there. Oh, that is so amazing. Nice, rich, creamy. The bacon, the crispiness of the mushrooms, onions and the garlic and the cheese on top. I tell you what, this is one of my favorite fuels for getting outside and active in the winter. So this is Dane Tulloch reminding you to go outside, get active, work up an appetite, and start cooking in the great outdoors.